This is GM Magazine. We'll be right back to look back with some people who are working very hard to keep alive the memory of GM of Canada's contribution to the great arms production days of the Second World War. 40 years maybe does seem like a long time, but there are so many of us who can still remember, in a personal sense, those days of the Second World War and the triumphant end of that epic struggle in Europe. That was 4 decades ago this May, and this truck dates back to those days of the 40s when Canada was a major arsenal for the Allied war effort. As we'll explain, we produced most of the trucks in the early war years, and while the Canadian automotive industry did put forth a necessary joint effort, the Chevrolet nameplate was very much in evidence. Now these war horses from the Second World War are being restored by GM members of the Ferret Club, attached to the Oshawa-based Ontario Regiment. The club members work most Saturday mornings, with the cooperation of General Motors, in various work bays of the truck plant. And on a time-available basis, too, GM provides the services of expert finishers and other trades to the project. The war effort those years ago was a massive one, with vehicles from Oshawa being shipped to theaters of action in Europe, the Middle East, the Pacific, and Australia. And quality control was, by the way, maybe even more important in those days, on a life-or-death basis.
We are affiliated with the Ontario Regiment in that most of us have either served actively with them or in some capacity over the years. Our initial being was to provide a show troop of armored vehicles for the regiment when they go on parade, and that's where the Ferrets came into it. They're a four-wheel drive armored vehicle. A little history on the trucks. In 1940, the British lost all of their wheeled type vehicles in Dunkirk and concentrated most of their production in England on airplane manufacturers. So they came to Canada, and General Motors worked with the British government using their designs for body-wise and General Motors driveline. All told, during the war, there was over 500,000 of that style vehicle built. And they're all right-hand drive, and they're all four-wheel drive, some six-wheel drive. The particular truck that we have out here is a four-wheel drive. It's called a 60 hundredweight Chevrolet, and it was built here in Oshawa in 1942.
There are many aspects of it, not only the mechanical, but the regimental markings taken from old photographs from veterans, and that's almost a certain area of the club itself, just making sure that all the markings are authentic and actually were in effect at the time.
We have a fair contact with parts around the province here. We seem to be able to pick parts up when we need them. It might take a little time, but eventually they'll show up, no problem, yeah.
The anti-tank gun was built by General Motors in Regina. It was called Regina Industries. After the war was a parts warehouse. They've since moved out of that building. So everything you see out there today was built by General Motors, most of it here in Oshawa. The gun, of course, built in Regina.
The Ontario Regiment Ferrets are working to deadline for 2 dates now, a regimental display in May and Armed Forces Day in June at CFB Trenton, Ontario. It was a time, an era, and an effort by a people for all of us to remember. May 1945. I'm Ken Cavanagh. We'll see you right here on GM Magazine.